All right, let's dive right in. Today, we're basically creating the ultimate recipe for success in shellfish farming. We're going to break down the exact water conditions you need to grow amazing, healthy oysters, clams, and, well, the whole shebang. So, let's get to it. So, you ever wonder what makes one oyster just perfect, Plump and delicious, while another one just kind of struggles? What's the real secret ingredient? Is it just luck, some kind of special genetics? Well, it turns out it's something a lot more fundamental than that. The secret? It's the world you build for it. I mean, think about it. For shellfish, these little filter feeders, their entire world is the water they live in. It's where they get their food, their oxygen, and the very building blocks they use to make their shells. So if you get the water right, you are well on your way to a perfect harvest. Okay, so let's start with the two most foundational ingredients in our whole recipe: salinity and temperature. You can think of these as, setting the oven to the right temperature and adding just the right amount of salt. You absolutely have to get these right from the very beginning. Now, what's really fascinating here is that there's no one-size-fits-all setting. Take a look. Oysters and clams, they kind of like it warmer and a little less salty. Their sweet spot is around 15 to 25 parts per thousand for salinity. But then you look at mussels and scallops, they want the exact opposite. They prefer it colder and saltier. So the huge takeaway here is that a farmer has to match their chosen species to the local environment perfectly. All right, next up in our recipe, life support. Getting the temperature just right is one thing, but our shellfish also need to be able to breathe and eat, and that's where dissolved oxygen and water flow come into play. It's such a simple question, but it is absolutely vital. You see, warmer water naturally holds less oxygen. So just because the temperature is in that perfect growth zone doesn't automatically mean the conditions are ideal. If there isn't enough oxygen, everything else just starts to fall apart. And here it is. This is the magic number. For shellfish to really thrive, dissolved oxygen levels need to stay above 5 to 6 milligrams per liter. If those levels drop below 3, they get super stressed, they stop feeding, and they can even die. This part of the recipe is completely non-negotiable. And this slide just perfectly illustrates why water flow is so critical. Think of it like a little underwater conveyor belt. A good moderate flow is constantly bringing in fresh, oxygen-rich water and tasty plankton for food. And at the same time, it's carrying away all the waste. Stagnant water is the absolute enemy. It's where oxygen disappears and waste builds up, creating a pretty toxic mess. All right, so we've covered the basics of the living space. Now let's talk about what's on the menu. What do shellfish actually eat, and what do they need to build those tough protective shells? This brings us to plankton, and of course, pH. So really get their diet, you have to understand this term, filter feeder. Shellfish literally sift everything they eat right out of the water. And get this, a single adult oyster can filter up to 50 gallons of water in a single day. That's just incredible. And it means the quality of their food depends entirely on the quality of the water around them. And their main course is phytoplankton, these microscopic marine algae. A nice, healthy amount is fantastic. It fuels amazing growth. But, it's that classic too much of a good thing problem. If you get excessive amounts of algae, it can lead to what are called harmful algal blooms, or HABs. And these can produce toxins that build up in the shellfish, making them really unsafe for us to eat. It's a very delicate balance. Now, nutrition isn't just for getting energy. Shellfish need very specific materials to, build their own homes. Their shells are made of calcium carbonate, and their ability to actually form those shells depends completely on the chemistry of the water. And that is where pH becomes a huge deal. This chart shows you the sweet spot. A slightly alkaline range, somewhere between 7.5 and 8.5, is perfect for building strong shells. But if the water becomes too acidic, say below a pH of 7, it can actually start to prevent shell development, making them weaker, more brittle. You could almost think of it as a kind of marine osteoporosis. So, we've put together the perfect environment, but our recipe isn't quite complete with a chapter on quality control. A truly successful farmer has to be a vigilant protector, constantly on the lookout for hidden dangers. One of the most basic physical threats is just sediment. Too much silt or sand floating around can clog the gills of shellfish, which makes it hard for them to breathe and eat. And in really bad cases, it can literally bury them alive. This is a huge reason why so many modern farms use off-bottom cages and racks to keep their shellfish up and out of the mud. And because they filter so much water, shellfish are basically sponges for any pollutants in the area. That's why keeping a clean site isn't just a good idea, it is everything. This means picking a spot far away from any industrial runoff, testing the water constantly for contaminants, keeping a sharp eye out for those HABs we talked about, and of course, strictly following all the safety regulations. You know, when you put all of these pieces together, you start to realize something. A shellfish farmer isn't just a producer. They're more like the guardian of a very, very delicate marine ecosystem. This quote really just says it all, doesn't it? Success isn't about forcing growth. It's about creating that perfect world where shellfish can just thrive naturally. So managing salinity, temperature, oxygen, flow, food, and safety, that's not just a checklist of chores. It's the very heart of the craft. And all of this leaves us with one final and really important question. We have a pretty good recipe for today, but our oceans are facing these massive changes, from rising temperatures to increasing acidification. So the real challenge ahead is, how will farmers need to adapt this recipe for the oceans of tomorrow?
Want to raise healthy, profitable shellfish without beginner mistakes? Get How to Raise Shellfish by Gerard, your step-by-step guide to successful shellfish farming. Link below.